All right. Obviously, don't write this down. This is the unit circle. Um, when we graph sine and cosine, remember how we said like you guys you just have to know, or you have to memorize those original charts. Like you guys always started with an XY chart today when you do that warm-up problem. And with those charts, just remember like they come from these 90-degree points. So the 0, the pi/2, the pi, the 3 pi/2, all of that you write at the very start of your problem just comes from the unit circle. If you're doing sine, like you guys did in today's warm-up, your y values are the y coordinates. That's why it's 0, 1, 0. Like that's why it oscillates like that, those original starting points. If I were to give you a cosine graph, you would do the same thing, but remember the starting points are different. Oops, not that one. All of those y values are what you start with, okay? Secant and cosecant are the same thing. Like you're still started, like your starting chart is still the same. The only difference is with secant, since secant's the opposite of cosine, you flip that coordinate. You flip your x coordinate. You flip your x coordinate. If you're doing cosecant, which is the opposite of sine, you take your y coordinate, flip it, flip it, flip it. So your starting chart is really similar, but it looks a little bit different. Okay, so let's start with cosecant. So just basic, we're not doing any transformations, just y equals cosecant x. I'll show you what the original chart looks like. Okay, whenever you're graphing cosecant, think, what is that the opposite of? Cosecant's the opposite of sine. So like the sine table is going to be your starting point since cosecant's the opposite of sine. So I'd fill it in the same way I was doing a sine table. It'd be 0, pi/2, pi, 3 pi/2, 2 pi. Same starting points you guys are used to. All right. Now, again, my y values, let's fill it in. Let's, like, up to this point, let's just pretend like we're doing sine. So this would be 0, 1, 0, -1, 0, just like any other sine table. Okay. Here's where things change a little bit. When you look at those coordinate points, see, we're doing cosecant. Let's say I were to take this 0, let's say it's over 1, and let's say I were to flip it. That would be 1/0. Okay. I'll put this over 1, that would still be 1, but this would be 1/0. So basically, if I were to flip these, this would become 1/0. You can't have 0 in the denominator. Remember we talked about that last week? So anywhere where you flip a 0, this is going to be an undefined point. So you just write U for undefined. I know it doesn't really make much sense now, but once we start graphing, those will show up a little more. If I were to flip 1, it would still be 1. If I were to flip -1, it would still be -1, right? Because if I flip those, it's still the same thing. Okay. So don't worry about the ones or the -1s. Just know that where you have your zeros and you flip those, that's where you're going to have some undefined points. Okay. You don't have to draw this bottom part. I'm just going to show you like what a cosecant graph looks like and what these undefined points look like. When we graph cosecant, we end up with vertical asymptotes, and those correspond with these undefined points. So these vertical lines right here, those are the spots where we're undefined, okay? A cosecant graph basically takes a sine graph, and at the high point, it flips it up, and at the low point, it flips it down. So what you see in red is actually like the cosecant graph, okay? Again, I don't expect this to make a ton of sense right now, but this is just like what it's going to look like when we're done after we get through doing our changes, okay? Secondly, or lastly, let's do secant. So just basic secant, no transformations. Again, you want to think, what chart should I be starting with? Secant is the opposite of cosine. So I should be starting with a cosine chart. So when you're ready, your X's and Y's, they're all going to start like a cosine chart. And then cosine starts at 1, then goes to 0, then -1, 0, then 1. And same thing here. Since we're doing secant, we have to flip those values. So if I flip 1, it's still going to be 1. But if I flip 0, it's going to be 1 over 0. So this would be an undefined point. This would still be -1 if I flipped it. This would be an undefined point because I can't have 1 over 0. You don't have to draw this, but eventually a secant graph looks like this, where basically you graph cosine, and then you take the low points, flip them down, take the high points, flip them up. These would be your vertical asymptotes. Okay. So we'll do 2 of those and then have you guys basically spend the rest of the class period practicing. All right. Questions so far? All right, let's jump right in then. So we'll do our first one. So we'll have all the transformations in there. I'm just going to write in here secant. We want to start with our cosine table eventually when we get there. All right. Okay. Before we do the tables, though, we have to fill this in for the overall graph. These are no different than sine and cosine. So everything we did for sine and cosine is the same. The period is always 2 pi over b. Let's label this will be my A, B, C, D. So 2 pi over 2 means my period is just pi, right? 2 pi over b. Thing you guys just did in your warm-ups. Your phase shift is the opposite sign for C, so it would be plus pi. My amplitude, I can put a 1 right there since there's nothing in front of it. So I'm just going to say amplitude is 1. Vertical shift, it looks like my D is 1. So plus 1 for my vertical shift. Some of you may have already done this, but now you want to start with your original cosine table. And then cosine goes 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. That's, all right. This is undefined. This is undefined. Wherever you see 0, you're going to write U for undefined. Okay. Now, you're still going to do everything the way that we normally do them. It's just that you have to carry these undefined points down to the very end, so you know where your asymptotes are. So for my X values, I'm going to, what do I need to do? I need to divide everything by B, right? B and C relate to my X values. So 0, if I do pi over 2 divided by 2, it would actually be pi over 2 times 1/2 when I flip it, right? I would flip the 2, so it'd be pi over 4. Pi divided by 2 is pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 divided by 2 is 3 pi over 4 when you switch it or flip it, multiply. 2 pi divided by 2, if you did 2 pi divided by 2, the 2's would cancel, you'd just be left with pi. So I divided, so to get from here to here, I divided by 2. So it took care of my B. All right, let's finish our X's. Looks like we have one more with our C. We just have to add pi. I'm looking at my C right here. So this would be pi to start with. Pi over 4 plus pi. Pi over 4 plus, when you find common denominators, it becomes 4 pi over 4. So 1 plus 4 is 5 pi over 4. Kind of skipping over that part. I'm just finding common denominators for those when I'm adding. Pi over 2 plus pi would be pi over 2 plus 2 pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 4 plus pi, if I found common denominators, it'd be 7 pi over 4. And then pi plus pi is 2 pi. And then you're done with that one. Okay, so from here to here, what did I do? I added pi. All right, Y's usually go easy because they're just multiplying and adding. So I'm going to multiply by 1, which is just going to leave me with the same thing. Just be careful to carry down those undefined points on each graph. And then I'm going to add 1. So this would be 2, 1, 0, 1, 2. And then my undefined points would be right here and right here. All right, so when you're ready, just make like an XY axis and we can plot these. And I'll hold up here so everyone can get this. All right, let's jump back, but I'm going to start. This is pi 0, pi, 5 pi over 4, 3 pi over 2, 7 pi over 4. 2 pi. And this went from 0 to 1 to 2. All right, so I'm going to plot these points. Pi comma 2 would be right here. 5 pi over 4 comma 1 would be here. 2 comma 0. Points would look something like that. Okay, The third step is to these two undefined points, you have to plot your vertical asymptotes. So at pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4, I would go, wait, where was I at? Pi over 4, or 5 pi over 4 and 7 pi over 4. So right here and 7 pi over 4, those are the two spots where you had your u. So you have to write plot your vertical asymptotes. Okay, to finish this, there's kind of like two steps you have to take here. You want to lightly sketch in the cosine graph, and then we're going to go and then make those flips that we talked about. So just like with a light pencil mark, just lightly pencil in this cosine graph that you have plotted. And then what you do with a darker pencil mark is go to the bottom and take this parabola and just basically take this parabola and flip it the other way. So it would look like this. Okay, be careful not to cross over the asymptotes. You like consider this like the lane that you have to stay in. Okay, you could technically, you don't have to, but like these little half spots right here, you'd also be flipping this up, flipping this up. If it kept going, we'd flip the whole thing up, but just to show. So that's the graph. Okay, one more to go. Any questions on this? Anyone at home questions on this? All right. Okay, let's do one more and then you guys will be done with these notes. We'll do cosecant. So our first one was secant, I will do cosecant. This one you're going to want to think sine. Sine's the opposite of cosecant. Everything's still the same on the left. Periods 2 pi over b. Let's just label what I have. This is my A, B, C, D. Looks like my B is just going to be 1. So 2 pi over 1 is still 2 pi. Phase shift is minus pi over 2. Amplitude is absolute value of -2 is 2. Then vertical shift is -1. Remember, your overall amplitude is the absolute value. Your XY table still starts with sine. So 0 pi over 2 pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. And then sine goes 0, 1, 0, -1, 0. After this, everything's pretty much still like the same as what we did before. You would label your undefined points where your zeros are. Those are going to be your vertical asymptotes. And it looks like if I divide by b, dividing by 1 is still going to give me the same thing, right? That's my starting point if I divide by b. So dividing by 1, I still end up with the same coordinates. This was just dividing by 1. My last one, it looks like I would be subtracting pi over 2. Get to the next one. me know if you just need me to slow down. So I'm going to go 0 minus pi over 2 is negative pi over 2. Pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is 0. Pi minus pi over 2, if you found common denominators, would be pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 minus pi over 2, if you found common denominators, would just be pi. Same thing with the last one, find common denominators. We have end up with that. All right. I'm going to switch my y values and then I'll be done. So I'm going to multiply. I'm going to do a first. So multiply by -2. This was times -2. And then I want to subtract 1. So -1, -3. Here it was -1. Oh, I forgot my u's. I forgot to carry those down. That's undefined. And then you go u here, undefined, undefined, undefined. Just carry those same spots down. All right, so you guys already started, but you'd want to make an XY axis, and then let's plot all these points. Pause here for a few more seconds. You want to get caught up. All right, -pi over 2, 0 pi over 2. So -pi over 2, 0 pi over 2. And we have 3 pi and 3 pi over 2. Go from -1 to -3 to 1. -1, 0, -3. All right. Vertical asymptotes are the first, the middle, and the last. So it would be right here, right here, right here. Then you connect your dots, like lightly sketching your sine graph. Same color. Lightly sketching your sine graph. Where am I at here? Here. And then flip. So you take your top point, flip it. Take your bottom point, flip it. Don't cross over your asymptotes. And that's your final graph. Not that bad once you know sine and cosine, right? That's the, once you have that, it's just flipping them and putting in your asymptotes. Any questions? Anyone at home, any questions? Oh, someone got dropped. Austin, okay. Really, what I have for you for the next, these last 20 minutes or 25 minutes, whatever we have left, is I want you guys just to like work with each other and practice a little bit, kind of like we did with our warm up. You guys can get out of your seats if you want, move around. I've got this sheet that I was going to get you guys for homework eventually. And before I do that, though, I wanted to get you your exit ticket at the end of class. So exit ticket is going to be on sine, cosine. This could be one of these, but you can use your notes. You can use anything that you have. Okay. All right. If you want to find another spot on the board, let's do that. We'll do 2 problems together. Work with a partner if you want. Help each other out. And then we'll get you your exit ticket after that. All right. Those of you at home, you can just do this in your notebook, and I'll write the answers up here so eventually you can check all your work. All right. I'm sure I have everything here. Okay. Number 1, we'll do 2 of them. This will be the first one. Again, it helps if you just label your A, B, C, and D. Good. And then when you divide by 1/2, that's the same thing as dividing by a fraction is the same thing as keep, switch, flip. So you keep the top, switch the multiplication, and flip. So it's really like saying 2 pi times 2/1. And that'll get you your period. That looks good. Let me double check the key for the final chart there. Yeah, let's go. All right, folks at home, I'm going to start writing the answer key up here. 2 pi divided by 1/2 would be 4 pi. Phase shift would be plus pi. Amplitude would be 1. Vertical shift, there's none. You want to start with a sine. Then you want to divide everything by 1/2 and add pi. So if you divide by 1/2, that's like timesing by 2. Your first chart. Add pi. That's right line defined points. Find, undefined, undefined. Now there's no amplitude change, no vertical change. So actually your x values would stay the same. So undefined, undefined, undefined.